Hello everyone, and welcome to this tutorial in the shoreline model. This tutorial will cover the headland beach example, and all the files that are needed to run this example should have been supplied as part of this step-by-step guide or part of this tutorial. So the first thing that we need to do before we start the tutorial is to copy all our files into a new location where we can start. And then basically the starting point for the step-by-step guide or this tutorial is a standard setup of the Mike 21 FM coupled sand transport model. And it's actually this file here, which is called Headland Beach Standard Morphology. So I'm just going to open that file. And let's see, it's taking a little while to open, and then I'll just maximize it here. So this is our starting point for this tutorial, and basically it is a setup for a coupled Mike 21 hydrodynamic, spectral wave, and sand transport model. And the reason why we are starting from this point in time is that there are other tutorials or guidelines in how to set up the hydrodynamic model, how to set up the spectral wave model, and how to set up the sand transport model. So it is simply to focus the present tutorial on the shoreline morphology part. But basically, just to get us all on the same page, I will just very quickly and very briefly run through all the different settings and all the different choices that have been made when setting up this standard morphology run file. So this example concerns a headland beach, and it's just an artificial example or an idealized example that has been generated. The shape of the shoreline here is taken from a headland beach on the New South Wales coast of Australia, on the east coast of Australia. So it's just one of those many headland beaches that are located on this shoreline. The area that we are focusing on today is the area which is covered by the fine resolution in the mesh. So if we zoom in, you can see there's an area in the mesh which has a fine resolution close to the shoreline, and that is our area of interest. So the task is to set up a shoreline model that can calculate the morphology along this area of interest, and also evaluate what is the impact on this shoreline morphology from different mitigation schemes. So that was just a little bit about the starting point and the mesh. So moving on, we will simulate 1 year. That year has been separated into 2,928 time steps, each of 3 hours. So you can see here we're starting on the 1st of January 2004 and ending on the 1st of January 2005. So this is an idealized case, so we will run with constant boundary conditions. So actually the simulation period is not so important, of course. So in terms of module selection, well, the starting point is that we have the hydrodynamic, the spectral wave, and the sand transport model selected and set up. In the hydrodynamic module, we will use the quasi-stationary formulation, and we will use the solution technique parameters or values that is set up on this page here. You can see here the maximum time step in this quasi-steady solver is set to 3 hours, matching the overall time step of the simulation. Now what this means is that if the quasi-steady hydrodynamic solver does not find the quasi-steady solution, that is, if the maximum time step is reached, then we simply have the fully dynamic solution. So when we are running the model, it's a good setting to make sure that these two numbers are the same. That way we can ensure that if we run out of iterations, we simply have the fully dynamic solution, which is a nice feature. Moving on, you can see we will have no depth correction. Flood and dry is just the standard values. We use a standard Smagorinsky formulation for the horizontal eddy viscosity. Manning number of 32. No Coriolis forcing. Our domain is small enough that we can ignore that. We will not use any wind, no ice, and no tidal potential or evaporation, no infiltration. But of course we need wave radiation from our spectral wave simulation. This is the primary driver for the longshore sediment transport, which is important for the coastal morphology. So it's very important to have a good description of the wave radiation. And the best description we can have is when we run it in this coupled mode where the hydrodynamic and spectral wave models are run simultaneously, impacting each other. We don't have any structures yet. We will use structures later on in the tutorial when setting up some of these mitigation measures, and the initial conditions are just standard ones. Now the boundary conditions: on the north boundary we will use land, on the east boundary we will use land, and on the south boundary we will use land. Now that's okay in the present case because we are ignoring the tides. We have decided that the tides are so small that they will not impact our results for this idealized case. And as you can see, when we only have longshore transport or wave-driven currents, then these boundaries are located far enough from our area of interest that having land here and here will not impact our results. In terms of outputs, we'll just have the area output in the HD model, and just a few items here just so we can see what's going on, what's the current speed, and it's nice to have these current vectors as well, the u and v velocity, so we can plot the current vectors. Now for the spectral wave module, this is run in directionally decoupled parametric mode using the quasi-steady time formulation. For the spectral discretization, we are only using 16 directions. Now that's maybe a little bit on the low side, but for our example here it's okay. It makes of course our model run faster, which is nice when we are having these examples for educational purposes. We have this parameters for the solution technique are seen here. Pretty standard ones, maybe a little bit high here, but that's okay. In general, you should make sure that you have enough iterations when things are happening in the spectral wave module. So you want to have at least, say, maybe 40 to 50 iterations at each time step when things are happening. If you have that, then you usually have a good enough solution for what we are doing anyways. The water level, we will get the water level from the HD simulation, and we will also get the current variation from the HD simulation. We will ignore wind, ice, diffraction. We will include wave breaking, of course, and you can see here we're just using a standard Batjes and Janssen with a specified gamma wave breaking formulation. And for the bottom friction, just a small Nicoraz roughness. Now for the boundary conditions, we will have, that should not be a closed boundary, that should actually be lateral boundary. So we just change it to that, so lateral boundary on the north and also lateral boundary on the south. And then on the east boundary, we will supply these wave conditions that you see here. So this is just constant wave conditions, which means that because we are using these quasi-steady solvers both in the hydrodynamic and in the spectral wave module, it means when we have constant boundary conditions, our models will run relatively fast. That's good, of course, for educational purposes and also in real life. But in real life, you would probably always have some variation in your wave boundary conditions, of course. For the outputs, again, just the area output and just a few selected parameters. It's nice to see the peak wave period as well, of course, or normally. So that's okay. Then we'll move on to the sand transport module. You can see here it's obviously the model type is combined waves and currents, and we have supplied a sediment table that we want to use here. This is just using this has been generated previously, and you can have a look yourself in the LON file to see what the parameters was used to generate this. Otherwise there's not so much. You can see it's relatively fine sediment, with a small grading coefficient, and of course the forcing for the sediment transport has to be the wave field from the SW simulation. That's very important to remember to tick that box there. And now this is just a standard morphology, so there's no shoreline morphology in here yet. But just to have a quick look at the model definition here, 10 meters per day as maximum bed level change and a speed up factor of 1. And of course we include the feedback on the hydrodynamics back from the morphological calculation. So this was just a little bit about the standard setup. Now we turn our attention to the shoreline model part. So if I click here in this box here, I activate the shoreline morphology module, and then you can see a new section appears here under the morphology, which is called shoreline morphology. And there's a little red cross there. That's because we have not supplied any of the inputs for the shoreline model yet. And you can see here that there are 4 different inputs that we need to supply: the baseline, the coastline, the edge map, and the profile. So in order for us to supply those inputs, we need to generate them first. And all of these 4 inputs can be generated using a new tool that we have created in the mesh generator. So I'm just going to open up a new mesh generator file here and specify the correct map projection, which will be MGA56. So I have a new mesh generator file here, and the first thing I do is load my mesh. So simply press load mesh, and then I navigate to where I put my test files here in the test folder, Headland Beach. And here I have my Headland Beach mesh, so I'm going to open that. And again you can see our area of interest has much finer resolution than in the rest of the domain. So the first thing I want to do is I want to generate a baseline. And the baseline is used in the shoreline model to define the direction in which shoreline points are moved. So that's similar to LIDLine. But the difference between LIDLine and the shoreline model is that in LIDLine the baseline is just a straight line, whereas in the shoreline model here we can have a curved baseline. And that of course makes the model a lot more flexible, and it means that we can easier describe the morphology for such a curved headland beach here, because we can simply have our baseline follow the depth contours along the curved beach. So that's exactly what we're going to do. So I'm going to draw the baseline as an arc using the arc tool. So in order to do that, first I need to enable arc editing by pressing here, and then I can simply select the arc drawing tool there, and then I can draw a baseline sort of along the shoreline here. I prefer to have my baseline located just outside of my mesh, and of course parallel to the depth contours. Now the mesh here was generated so that this outer boundary here, or this outer boundary here, does follow the depth contours. So I'm just going to draw the baseline along here, sort of like this. like this here. And then end node, insert end node, like that. And just zoom out so I have a better overview. And yeah, I mean it looks to be following that line quite well. So the next thing I need to do is redistribute the number of vertices. So this basically determines the resolution, a longshore resolution in the shoreline model. So in the present case, I'm just going to select the distance between those vertices as 200 meters and then have a look at it. I think that looks pretty good actually. You can see there are maybe a few humps along the way there because of course it was hand drawn to start with. So a way to get rid of some of those humps is to simply reduce the number of vertices and then increase it again, redistribute them again. That kind of has a tendency to smooth out that baseline a little bit. So now I think we have a baseline that we are happy with. So the next thing I do is I set the properties of the baseline. I set the proper attribute of the start node to 99 and the other two here I set to 100 and then say OK. So now I'm ready to draw my coastline, and the coastline should be off. I'm going to draw the coastline as close to the 0 meter depth contour as I can. And in order to do that, I just select the shaded contour here in the mesh. And then I say don't draw the mesh. And I want to select a contour palette where it's very clear to me where that 0 meter depth contour is, so it's easier to see. So I can just do that by selecting this like that. So then we have this, the 0 meter depth contour is this contour here. And again, I'll just draw the shoreline or coastline as an arc. Now, both when I draw the baseline and when I draw the shoreline, I start on the left end of the beach when I look out towards the sea. And that is important, that these lines or these arcs are drawn in the correct manner. So when you're drawing these arcs, you should always start on the left end when you're looking out towards the sea, standing on the beach looking out towards the sea. Now for the shoreline, it's important that the first point is located outside the baseline. So I'm just going to put the first node out here, and then the rest of the nodes, it's not so important that where they are located, as long as I'm resolving the gradients in the line I want to draw, right? So I'm just going to draw it like this here, like this. Like this here. All the way to the end, and then again the end point, the end node needs to be located outside or after the end of the baseline. So insert end node here, and then I will set the attributes of the coastline like this, and that's 109 and 110 and 110. Oh, 110, and you can say OK. And now the next step is to make sure that the shoreline vertices or shoreline points conform to or match the baseline points. And there's a tool to ensure that, so I don't need to do it by hand, and that tool is located under the shoreline menu here. So I simply click Manage Shoreline Data, And then once I've set the baseline attribute to 100 and the coastline attribute to 110, matching the attributes I set on the two arcs, then I can simply click modify coastline arc here. And then you can see we have the shoreline vertices were moved around. So they are now located right at the center point between two baseline points and perpendicular to the local orientation of the baseline. And that is exactly how they should be located. When you in order for these files, or not files yet, but for these lines to be used by the shoreline model. So now I'm ready to export the shoreline data, and I do that by pressing this button here, and then simply supply a file name for the baseline, and also a file name for the coastline. And then we click OK, and then those two files are generated or exported. So that's good. So the next thing we want to generate is the edge map. And we do that by specifying the offshore extent of the map. So the shoreline tool here uses the baseline as the inshore extent of the edge map, and an arc that we draw here on the offshore part to define where is this edge map going to be drawn. And that's also why it's beneficial to have the edge map or the baseline located just outside our mesh file, because that makes that ensures that we can use this baseline as the inshore boundary for our edge map. So the edge map should be located far enough offshore that it's always beyond the depth of closure, also after there has been morphological changes in our shoreline model. But it cannot be located too far offshore, especially when we have a curving, not especially, but when we have a curving shoreline, it cannot be located too far offshore. And that's because if we draw lines perpendicular to the baseline, to the local orientation of the baseline, then those lines must not cross each other inside our edge map domain. Then things go wrong. For that reason, there is a limit to the offshore extent, or to how far offshore we can actually locate this offshore limit for the edge map. In the present case, we're going to locate it just beyond the depth, the 8 meter depth contour, which will be around here. And you can say that once you have defined your mesh, let's just draw the mesh again here, you are also limited by the resolution in your mesh, because you would like to have relatively good resolution in your mesh inside the area covered by the edge map, because that's where the morphology can be active, and in this area you would like to have good enough resolution. So in the present case, I'm just going to draw the offshore limit here around the 8 meter depth contour. So just gonna draw it like this here. Should be alright. Insert end node. There we go. And again, I need to set the attributes. So 119, 120, and 120. And then I select manage edge map, and you can see I've already set the attribute to the predefined value of 120. So I can simply click create edge map, and the edge map is generated. And then I suggest to immediately export the edge map to a DFSU file. Let's just set the item name here, and then once we have exported it, it's a good idea to open it up and have a look to see if it matches our expectations. And what are those expectations? Well, I mean, first of all, it's a good idea to check that we do have a number of values, or we do have a number of cells or mesh elements next to each other along these strips of shore face here. So we don't want to have only one cell, one element, and one element. We would like to have a well-defined strip described by a number of points, and normally I say we need at least 2 to 3 elements with the same value or with the same map value next to each other across such a strip here. You can probably get by with less, and you can see here we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So here we have 5 to 6, and we actually only need 2 to 3. So in the present case, we could increase the alongshore resolution in the shoreline models simply by adding more vertices on our baseline and then redoing, of course, the shoreline and the edge map. But we're just going to keep what we have now. And you can also, another thing to check is down here where the shoreline is curved. It's a good idea to just check the values to make sure that nothing strange is going on. Strange things can happen if these lines that are perpendicular to the baseline, if they start to cross each other, then strange things can happen. It doesn't look like it's the case here. So we'll just close this file again and move on to the last input that we need to generate, which is the coastal profile. So the coastal profile in the present case is just a constant coastal profile all the way along the shoreline. That's of course because this is an idealized case and it's the simplest to set up and also simplest to analyze the results from. But in reality, I think along such a headland beach here, probably there would be a change in the slope of the coastal profile, in the overall slope of the coastal profile along the beach, and in that case, we would need to supply a varying coastal profile along the shoreline. Both of these cases can be, both of these types, the single coastal profile and the varying coastal profile, can be generated using the shoreline toolbox in the mesh generator. But before we start, we need to just load the mesh again. And the reason for that is that right now it's the values from the edge map that is loaded into the memory of the mesh generator. So because we would like to extract the bathymetry from our mesh file, we need to load the mesh again. We're just going to say manage profiles here. And then you can see we have this menu here where we can manage our profiles. Now the start of the profile, that is on the onshore. So negative values, that is onshore of the mean sea level, and positive values, so the end of the profile, that is in the offshore end. That's out at the depth of closure or beyond the depth of closure. And you can see in the present case, I think this 800 meters for the offshore position is a little bit on the low side, so I'll change that to 1300, and then I don't need 100 points. I'm just going to use 31 points. That will give me a resolution of 50 meters, which should be okay. Then I will say here it's okay, extract set values from the mesh, and I will just add a single profile here around the center of the bay, and if I click apply, I can see where I have which coastal ID I have selected. Now if I had varying coastal profiles, then I would simply add one in the end of the beach, say at 4, and then another one at the other end of the beach, maybe 46. So let me just delete this one and then say apply. And in this case I would then, or this tool would then have interpolated or extracted a profile at the northern end and a profile at the southern end. and then interpolated all the profiles between these two profiles based on those two. So you can see it's quite easy actually to generate these longshore varying coastal profiles using this tool. But in the present case, I'll just use a single one, around 20 there. So say okay to that. And now I'm ready to export my profiles. And because I only have one, it will just be a single profile. The coastal ID doesn't matter. It's going to be the same all the way along the shoreline anyway. And I will just say profile here, profile, okay, and save that to an XYZ file. So that has been created. Now I will just save this setup file, and I'll just call it make shoreline inputs. Okay, it's always a good idea to save this setup file so you can go back and see what you have supplied, and if you want to make any changes, maybe you wanted to move the offshore boundary a little bit or make other changes, so it's a good idea. But now before I can use the coastal profile that I have just extracted, I need to pre-process it a little bit, so I'm just going to open it here in my favorite text editor, which is for myself it's called TextPad. And the reason I need to modify it a little bit is that beyond the depth of closure, I need to have a coastal profile which is steeper than the profile that is in the mesh. And the reason for that is if I don't have a steeper profile beyond the depth of closure than what is in the mesh, then this supplied coastal profile is going to be used all the way out here to 1300 meters, not only to the depth of closure. So I'm simply going to delete these values here beyond the depth of closure and then put in a new line, minus 18.0000, like that. And then just one more line there. And now you can see this corresponds actually to a slope of 1 in 10 beyond the depth of closure. So thereby I'm ensuring that the coastal profile is only used down to the depth of closure and a little bit beyond that, just where that 1 in 10 slope is going to cross with the bathymetry in the mesh. And I'm going to do the same thing onshore. So I'll just delete those two and then say minus 100, and then let's say that's going to be and one more like that. And then I'll just save it as a new name here, save closure depth 8, dune height 1, and save. So now I have actually generated and prepared all my shoreline model inputs. So I'm ready to supply those to the model. So I will just close that down here. And then you can see I will start by supplying the baseline here. So I simply select the baseline that I have just created and the coastline that I have just created, as well as the edge map that I have just created. Let's see, projects. Oh. Edge map, okay. And the last thing is the profile, and that's this profile KAK. So then I have to remember also to set the closure depth, that was 8 meters, and the dune height 1 meter. You can see both these numbers are positive numbers. So that's just a definition, so the closure depth is simply defined as a depth, and the dune height is defined as a height, so they are both positive numbers. So there's one thing, and then after we've supplied all these inputs, it's a good idea to just go back to the shoreline model, because we actually get this nice overview here of our inputs. And this is also a good place to check that these profiles are not crossing each other inside the domain. yeah, and you can also shift to show bathymetry here, so you can see, okay, this is just going on beyond the 8-meter contour here, which is a good thing. And you can even show the mesh, so you can check your resolution in this area as well. So and then the last one is of course the edge map, and you can also zoom in and have a look at how it looks. You can see here, when you zoom in, you can see this is where all the baseline points are located, and this is where all the shoreline points are located. So it's a good way of just checking the inputs that they are as they should be. You can also see here you have one coastline point on the outside of the baseline, and you should also have that in the other end. So there, and which we have, so that's good. So then this is a solution technique which we didn't talk about, and basically what these numbers here, the tolerance and the maximum number of iterations, what that signifies is iteration parameters. So because we have this curved baseline in the shoreline model, and because of the way we treat the bathymetry beyond the depth of closure and inshore of the dune height, then when we solve the one-line equation, we make a small sediment conservation error at each time step. It is just a small error, but still over time it can grow, and for that reason we have an iterative procedure which minimizes this error down to a specified tolerance. And that tolerance is the tolerance that you can specify here. So you can see here it's specified as 0.001 cubic meter, and the maximum number of iterations here is 100. Now if your model is not converging, that is, if you're seeing many time steps where the number of iterations in the shoreline model is more than the maximum number, so in this case 100, then you should probably decrease your tolerance or increase the maximum number of iterations, because it is quite important that most of the time steps converge, or the shoreline model converges for most of the time steps, because in case the model doesn't converge, then it sort of reverts back to the original solution. So then your error will be the original one. So it will not use any of the iterations for that particular time step. There is another input here, and that is initial conditions, which can be used to predefine an accumulated change in the shoreline position, or an accumulated change in the shoreline position and net transport rates and gross transport rate. That's mostly used if you are continuing a simulation from a previous simulation, like a hot start, you can say. So then we need to define some outputs. So you can see we have already defined a 2D output for just the normal sand transport model. I don't think we talked about that before, so I'll just touch upon that briefly. So of course it's nice to have the total load in the X and Y directions, and these rates of change are also important when we're running these morphological simulations. I always like to see the total load as well, and also the accumulated load in the X and the Y direction. I like to have these two there, because then you can put on the sediment error, or the vectors for the sediment transport, showing the accumulated transport vectors. So that's just some of those outputs. Then now we're going to make a new output that will be the coastline output. So we'll just call that coastline, so it's easier for us to navigate. And then we select the field type as the coastline, and we will just call this coastline, and then you can see the extension DFS1. So this is a DFS1 file, and I usually just select all of these outputs items. It doesn't take up that much space because it's a DFS1 file, and it can be nice to have, or nice to see some of these results, especially if there are issues or if we don't understand some things. It's good to have all these so we can go in and check different things. So now we're just going to save this as a new name. So let's call it Shoreline Morphology KAK. Save, and now we're ready to run. And launch settings, 1 thread per subdomain and 4 subdomains, matching the number of cores on the machine, and then we can press OK. So now you can see the model is starting up, and it's running the first time step now. So because we are running with the quasi-steady HD simulation and the quasi-steady spectral wave model, and we have the constant boundary conditions in the wave model, then in the beginning it will take quite a long time for each time step while the quasi-steady solvers are finding the stationary solution. So you will see the first time estimate for how long this model takes to run will be relatively large. You can see it starts there at 37 hours, but relatively quickly this should decrease significantly. So you can see we are already down to 12 hours now, and now 3 hours and 14 minutes and 12 minutes. So that's a more realistic estimate. I think I have timed it before. It has taken approximately 15 minutes to run this model. So while it is running, we can have a look already at some of the outputs. Namely, we can have a look at the coastline output. So we simply press view on this button here. Then the DFS1 file will open up. So first item we look at is the littoral drift. So at the first time step there was no drift because there were no waves or anything, obviously. And then you can see this is the drift after 3 hours or for the first time step, and it has a lot of spikes in it. Also has, you can see, you have to remember the first point here in this result file is located at the left end of the beach. So this transport here is located at the left end of the beach. That's also the northern end, and this transport out here, that's the transport at the right end of the beach, so at the southern end. You can see the transports or the littoral drifts here are negative, indicating that the transport is from right to left. And that's, I think that's, we can understand why that is. If we go back and have a look at our domain, so this is the domain here, and the waves are coming in from 140 degrees, so from this direction down here. So that's of course why we are seeing transport from right to left. Now if we go down a few time steps, you can see that slowly some of these spikes are becoming smaller, and as time goes and the morphology is reacting to the gradients in this littoral drift, then we should see the littoral drift signal becoming more and more smooth towards the end of the 1 year simulation. If we move on to the next item that we will look at is we can have a look at the offshore transport, which I think is an interesting one, or net offshore transport. So the offshore transport shows the transport across the boundary, the offshore boundary that is at the depth of closure, and it's perhaps a little bit difficult to relate to this transport here, offshore transport in meters per second. It's hard to know how large is that number compared to the other transport, so therefore it's a good idea to also look at this net littoral drift or net offshore drift, which is a lot easier to relate to some things or to the other values here. Now, of course, this is preliminary results. At the end of the simulation, we will look at it again and try to compare this net offshore transport to some of the other transport rates that are happening. But one good thing, or one thing you can do already, is we can already, after 12 days, we can say, okay, we have 75 cubic meters of sediment entering the domain over the offshore boundary at this particular shoreline section here. So is that a large number or not? Well, that depends on the area over which this 75 cubic meters are distributed, and that area is called the vertical area in front of the shoreline edge. And if we look at that area, you can see that area is 1600, between 15 and 1700 cubic meters, or no square meters. So we have to relate the transport rate over the offshore boundary to this area, then we get a feel for how large a change in the shoreline position are we actually talking about. And luckily you can see that after 12 days it was relatively minor, so just 75 divided by 1500, so that's a very small number, of course, but it is only after 12 days. We'll have to double check it towards the end of the simulation to see whether this net offshore transport is causing any problems or not. If it is causing problems, if you think that it is too large, too much transport is happening over that offshore boundary, then it can be manually removed from the results in a post-processing step, of course. So let's just see, how is our simulation doing? It's saying that it should be done in 7 minutes. So I will just see you guys in 7 minutes. Welcome back. There is only 12 seconds left of the simulation, so we are resuming the tutorial now. And we just have the final time steps done. Then we can view again the results here from the shoreline model. And now you can very clearly see, when we look at the littoral drift, you can see that it starts out with a lot of spikes, but as time goes, the signal becomes more and more smooth and ends up being relatively smooth. Of course, there's still some gradients along there, but that should also be the case. We just don't like to see such a spiky signal as we saw in the beginning. And you can say that in order to remove that spikiness, it is a good idea to run a warm-up model. A lot of these spikes that we see is due to the initial shoreline position that we have drawn not being in equilibrium with the forcing. And you can say, no matter how good data you have or how accurate you try to specify this initial shoreline position, then it's almost always going to be a little bit out of equilibrium with the forcing that is calculated by the model, or based on the boundary conditions that we supply. So in order to kind of remove those spikes from the initial or from the actual results that we produce out with our shoreline model, it's a good idea to run a warm-up period to kind of warm up that initial position of the shoreline. And the way we do it is we simply run the model for a year, and then we use the results from that run as initial shoreline position. So we'll just save this under a new name, shoreline morphology. Let's call that baseline, and we'll set the time as 1 year later, 2005. And now we can then supply the results that we have just calculated as the initial shoreline position. So here item X, coastline X, item Y, coastline Y, and then we are actually ready to run that model. So that will then be our actual baseline run, you can say. But now while that is running, we can have one more look at some of those other results from our warm-up run. So I think it's interesting to check this net offshore transport to see what we end at, and in the present case we end at plus minus 500 cubic meters. I'm actually quite happy when I see this transport, both positive and negative net offshore transport, because it means that we are not consistently getting sediment into the model domain or consistently taking sediment out of the shoreline model domain. And you can also relate these changes again, plus minus 500 meters, to the area over which these volumes are distributed, and it's, you can see 15 to 1700. So in fact 500 cubic meters of sediment is corresponding to less than half a meter of change in shoreline position. And when we look at the accumulated change in the shoreline position along the shoreline, we see again a very spiky signal. Now, of course, the accumulated change in shoreline position is more or less equal to the gradient of the littoral drift. So any small variations in the littoral drift will give spikes or large changes in the accumulated change of shoreline position. But we still see that we have this area of erosion in the southern end of the beach, and then we have a shoreline section where we have more or less neutral development. But it is actually quite hard to see what exactly is going on, and therefore it is often easier to look at the net littoral drift to get a feel for where we have erosion and accretion and what the transport rate is doing. And here it's very clear, of course, that we have an area of erosion in the southern end of the beach, and then a relatively stable development in the northern end of the beach. That is also what we expected, or you can say how this example is set up. So once our baseline simulation is done, we're going to implement a protective measure that can kind of try to mitigate some of the erosion that is happening on this southern end of the beach. But first, we would like our baseline simulation to be done, so that will be done in 11 minutes. And of course, we're not going to wait in the tutorial for that. So I'll just see you in 11 minutes. Alright, so the baseline simulation is now almost done. So we'll just have a quick look at the coastline result from that simulation. So we select the accumulated change of shoreline position, and then we'll see that the result is a lot less spiky than it was before. I mean, it is still does have some spikes in it, but it's much more clearly defined zone of erosion in this southern end of the beach, and then a more clearly more neutral development for the northern part of the beach. So that's good. Our warm-up period clearly has an effect. on these results. So it will be, the run will be done in another 26 seconds, and then we will have a look at the 2D results when that is done. Alright, so now it's done, so we'll have a look at the 2D results, and let's just have a look at the bed level change. So you can see here the bed level change at the 0th time step. So before the model is even run, we have a change in the bed level. And the reason is that the morphology defined by the shoreline model, by the initial position of the shoreline position and the coastal profile that we have supplied, does not match exactly with the bathymetry that is in the mesh file. And the difference is what we see here in terms of the bed level change at the initial time step. Now, of course, it's nice to know, but it's kind of clogging our results because it makes it difficult to see whether the erosion that and accretion that we are seeing here is actually due to that initial change or not. So in order to get rid of it, we have to first extract the bed level change from the very first time step. So we will just do that here, baseline, ST, select that ST sand transport area output, and then a new output here from the data extraction. Then we'll select area series, and let's just call it initial bed level change. Open. Input. And you can see we will just only extract the 0th time step. That's very important that we have only the 0th time step. And we'll just only extract the bed level change as well. And just save as here. Extract initial bed level change. Save. And then run that extraction. Okay. Great. And now we can open our sand transport in the data manager. So simply right click on it, open with data manager. And if we then select our bed level change, we can then use the calculator feature here. So edit calculator, add variable, initial bed level change. And then we will subtract the bed level change from the current item. We do that by writing this current item minus variable 3, calculate, and save this as a new name, new. And now you will see the actual accretion and erosion in our domain during the simulation without that initial contribution. So again, we see clearly we have this erosion area in the southern end of the beach and then a more neutral development in the northern end of the beach. So now we're going to introduce an offshore breakwater which can help to mitigate some of this erosion that we are seeing. So again, we're seeing this the erosion that we are seeing is located in this area. So let's say maybe we had some critical infrastructure located in this area here that we wanted to protect. Then we could introduce an offshore breakwater along this shoreline here, place it at the correct location, and then we will see if we can alleviate some of the erosion in this area. So that's something that's quite easy to do in the shoreline model once you have a baseline model up and running. So we will just open the baseline model that we used before, and then we will save as breakwater. Now the breakwater we're going to introduce using structures in the hydrodynamic model and structures in the spectral wave module. And once we have introduced them in those two modules, then the flow field and wave field impact from the structure on the flow field and the wave field is automatically also included in the sediment transport and therefore in the shoreline morphology. So here under structures we will select dike, and then it's actually quite nice, this tool, if we just zoom in. So if we look back at our baseline result here, and then look at that bed level change, and then say, okay, we would like to protect this area here, so maybe we should have a breakwater that is 500 meter long breakwater, and maybe we will locate it from here to here. That's a good first test. And once we have can remember the approximate coordinates, then we can simply draw it in here. So we will just say add new dike from here to here. Oh, that's too many points. Delete. Maybe it's easier if I zoom in a bit here. Okay. Maybe it's probably easier if we just have 2 points. Our dike is not going to consist of more than just those 2 points, and then once we have those 2 points, they are quite easy to move around. So you can see I want my breakwater approximately here, so that's good enough, and we'll just call it dike 1, that's fine. And then you can see for the overflow, I mean, because it's a breakwater, not a dike, we'll just specify the overtopping, and we'll assume that it's sufficiently large that the discharge will always be 0, so that's fine. And then the location and geometry, we're just going to copy those two columns there, because we will need them when we need to input a similar structure in the wave model, and that is simply a line structure. So just input new line, structure, transmission coefficient. We will have 0 transmission and maybe 0.3 reflection. So that means we're not transmitting any wave energy across our breakwater, and we're reflecting 30% of the wave energy. And now we just have to be careful that we select the right projection here, and then we just simply add 2 new points and paste our geometry that we have just added, and we can check it in the geographic view that it is actually located in the right location, similar to the dike in the HD model. So that's all we need to do. Simply add the structure in the HD module and in the spectral wave module. Press save, and then we'll run that model and see what the effect of our offshore breakwater is. So again, this is going to take approximately 15 minutes to run. So we're not going to be bored with that, so we'll fast forward. Okay, so now the breakwater simulation has finished. And we can have a look at the results here in the outputs and transport. Here we go, view coastline. And then we can see, have a look at the accumulated change in shoreline position. And we can see, wow, it's very different than it was before. So we have a massive salient forming in the lee of the breakwater, causing accumulation of 50 meters of shoreline and downdrift erosion of minus 30 meters. So let's just have a quick look at how it compares to the previous development that we had. So we'll just add the baseline accumulated change in shoreline position here, and let's just call that one baseline. And then next one, breakwater accumulated change in shoreline position, breakwater. And then we can compare the development in the shoreline position here, time step by time step. So we see that immediately, even just after 1 month, we already have a clear salient forming in the lee there. And if we just zoom out and then skip to the end, we see the massive impact of this offshore breakwater on the coastal morphology here. And now perhaps this is actually too large, this impact that we are seeing. You can see we wanted to mitigate an erosion which was on the order of 15 meters per year, but we ended up creating a massive salient and also a massive downdrift erosion. But then that's part of the engineering design, of course, to try to reduce the size of the structure and then see what is the impact of that. So that's something to play around with. Of course, we could also go for a completely different mitigation measure. For example, we could add in a nourishment, or we could add in some headlands or some groins or something like that. But that's all of these structures are quite easy to simply input and draw in. I'm not going to say the changes to that, but for example, if we wanted to add in some headlands or one headland instead of this dike, I mean, then again it would be pretty easy to simply draw it in here, add new dike, and then zoom in. Now this is probably way too big, this headland here. We have to always remember to be realistic in terms of the size of the structures that we are suggesting. It's quite easy to get carried away when you're drawing in these large scales. So it's very likely that a headland a couple of 100 meters in the offshore direction, that's probably more realistic size. So again, if you wanted to run with this, you would then have to add the similar structure down in the spectral wave module and then test the impact. So that's all for this tutorial here. I hope that you have learned anything. If you have any questions, you are of course more than welcome to write to the software support with your questions. Thank you and enjoy the new shoreline model.